you are part of the conversation, but you're not the only one in the conversation.
You did this to me. You need to make it right.
That's not a plan. That's enabling. Hey, Bryon. First of all, I want to say thank you again for being on the podcast. I've heard nothing but great things. Because of you, people are wanting to get on this podcast and they want to share what they're sharing. And the gratitude that I want to share with you today about being on here with me again is people love that you're talking about real things, that you're being your real self, talking about real things, what you've overcome, giving your feedback. People have been listening to me for a while now, but your authenticity is appreciated and people recognize that. And that's what's making other people say, I want to be on there too, because they hear who we are and how we talk and how we want to pour into each other and how we're pouring into our audience. So again, Bryon Sweno, Sweno Visuals, cinematographer, documentary maker, photographer, you name it, this guy.
Just all the things.
This guy. Yeah. But he's a great person. He's great at all that other stuff, but he's an even better person. And I'm grateful to have you in my life and have you on the show again.
Appreciate that.
So we've been talking a little bit about this kind of pre-episode, but something that has kind of come up for us in real life. And again, this is some feedback that we're also getting from the listeners and watchers is, what if, here's kind of our theme for the episode. What if the life that you want is one hard conversation away? And I want to kind of set the foundation of that. Could be a conversation maybe that you've had to have with yourself. Maybe a conversation you've had with a loved one. Maybe it's somebody in your professional life. There are always going to be hard conversations, and I want to peel back a little bit, as we know we will. Mm-hmm. Kind of what makes it hard, and why are we putting it in a classification of a hard conversation in the first place? Is it because it's hard for us emotionally? Is it because what we're going to say is going to be hard for them? Or is it hard because of some other factor, right? There's a lot of things here. So whenever it comes to it, I'm going to talk a little bit more about kind of my self journey through having some hard conversations, because a lot of you talk about being stuck. You talk about wanting something but not sure how to get started. You talk about not having the confidence that you need, imposter syndrome, all these things. And sometimes it's really a hard conversation with yourself. But just hearing about that theme, that episode, or this theme for the episode today, what kind of resonates with you when you think about what if that life that you want, the business you want, the relationship you want, the career you want, what if it is one hard conversation away? What comes to your mind?
Yeah, that's one of those, again, kind of universal topics. Mm-hmm. Everybody is going to go through hard times. You're going to have hard conversations. And it's kind of built in the relationships and how strong the relationships are to me. And that includes with yourself. You know, we've talked about this in previous episodes, but being honest with yourself, that's a big part of all of this, the self-improvement aspects. You can't really improve on something if you pretend it isn't there, you know? And so this is another aspect of my life where I've always tried to be very open and very honest without being abrasive, you know, but I feel like I've always been the guy that people come to with things. And that makes me feel great because they trust me and they know that I'm going to give them genuine feedback, or else they wouldn't be asking about it, you know? And so I've had to have a lot of hard conversations, and I'm willing to give feedback if someone's going to ask for it, you know? And a couple different situations come to mind as examples. Like I had a recent scenario where we were working with a client and this was a reoccurring payment sort of a thing. Mm-hmm. And this is not about the money, obviously, but money is a thing when it comes to business. And it was one of those things where you have to, the person is a friend, and we've worked together for over a year. You know, I become friends with the people I work with because of the relationship building and how I'm honest and open. And so there's a friendship that, you know, in the back of your head, you know, if this conversation goes the wrong way, then maybe they could take it the wrong way, and that's the end of a friendship, let alone just what the topic is of the conversation. So I felt like even though it was going to be a hard conversation, I knew it And so I always try to approach it as, hey, we just need to find this solution, rather than going into a conversation and being like, you did this, pointing the finger, this is your problem, you need to figure this out. I always approach it as, no matter what this is, we just need to find a solution. And that kind of disarms, and it's from I actually genuinely feel that way. But that's something, if you're not as experienced in having hard conversations, you might feel that a personal attack almost feeling, and you get that fight or flight, and you're like, you did this to me, you need to make it right, you need to do this. And so we were in a situation where there was a failure to pay for an extended amount of time. And part of that was on me, which I held accountability for. I allowed it to happen for a while. But there comes a point where it just doesn't make sense anymore, and you have to sometimes set the friendship aside. You have to and some things, business needs to be business, and some people have a really hard time separating that as well. So I just approached it as like, the situation is whatever at this point. We need to figure out a solution to this. And I have some ideas for you on how we could do that don't involve me pointing the finger at you, And so we came up with a solution for the problem. And the solution to the problem was, we're just going to stop working together. And it's been more beneficial for him and his life at this moment, and beneficial for me and my business at the moment, to not set aside that time and energy. So it was mutually beneficial. I approached it like that, and he's the one who came forward with that solution as well. So I wasn't like, this is ending. I came with solutions to the problem, which is another big thing, I think. If you're going to approach a situation where you're having a hard conversation, whenever it's with another person especially, you should approach it with some solutions yourself. Whether that's you at work. This situation pops up all the time where employees will complain about management. I'm sure you've felt this a lot.
For sure. Yep.
But they don't understand all the things that management goes through, and I get that. But I've been on the employee standpoint as well. And, it's always like, well, they did this to us. But you don't know their situation. You don't know who's on, above them that's making this stuff happen. It's all trickles down and all the things. So I always approached it like, hey, if there's an issue, I worked at a factory here in town, and there were several times where I noticed very specific problems within, it was a production line, And so I noticed very specific problems that would pop up with almost every single thing that we did, almost every item that we manufactured. And so I thought of a few variations of solutions, and then I would go approach my boss and be like, hey, this is something I've noticed. Here's a couple ways that I have thought of that maybe we could fix the problem and make it more efficient for not only me to do the job, so it'd save me some, time and energy, but also that would save the whole entire plant. How many times does this thing get made a day over years, So any small improvement makes a big improvement over time. And so it's kind of like you said in the last episode, that just comes something as simple doesn't mean it's not effective or not as important. Those little simple things, you improve on 5 simple things and you make a gigantic improvement. So I would always just approach it as not pointing a finger, if especially you're talking with another person or even yourself, you don't want to start blaming yourself and get into I always do this, like the spiral of self-talk negatively. And then it just gets out of control, and you're digging a hole. You're at the bottom of the valley. You keep digging. We've all been there at some point in our lives, or you probably will be at some point, where you just dig in the hole and you can't put the shovel down. It's like therapeutic almost to dig the hole.
Yeah, great certainty.
But at some point you got to start, building the ladder to get back out of it. So, especially with other people, it's you're in control of yourself, and you can only, in that conversation, it could have went sideways, and he could have taken offense to what I was saying, and it could have went off the rails. But I was okay with that knowing that I was coming from a genuine place, knowing that I had, it's not like I met this guy yesterday. You know, we've been working side by side for over a year.
Yeah.
And so it's a hard conversation. No matter what you approach it like, you still get the butterflies, you still get the anxiety.
Yeah.
But it's the knowing that you're genuinely approaching it as a friend, as a person who cares. I cared about the solution for him.
Yeah.
Not just about whatever I was getting or not getting from it. And I think that's one of the biggest things with all this.
Yeah. And there's a couple, I appreciate you sharing that example too, because I think a lot of people can probably relate to a conversation that people have said that they know they need to have, but they just don't. Mm-hmm. And some of it's because they're not ready to have the conversation. And some of it, we do a lot of work about the conversation before. And then when we have the conversation, it's actually none of what we thought up in our own head is actually how it went at all.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with preparing as long as it doesn't prevent you from having the conversation. Right. And so a couple things and back, I want to kind of get your thoughts on if this, you feel like it applies, but so the idea of what you're not changing, you're choosing. So that's where we have the power to choose. Do we want the discomfort of the reason why we need to have the conversation, or do we want the thing on the other side of the conversation? Because ultimately, if you're in a relationship and something's not going well, they're not doing something, they're not loving you the way you need, they're not showing up, they're not giving effort, whatever the thing is, if you don't say anything about it, you're then choosing a life that you're never going to get your needs met. You're never going to feel seen. You're never going to feel heard. You're not going to have a real partner, all the things. Mm-hmm. So the things you're not changing, you're choosing. And sometimes just that's the tough conversation that you need to have with yourself of, am I okay with what I'm choosing by not having a conversation to make a change? Mm-hmm. So that hopefully, right, kind of makes some people go, ugh. Like that's typically when people are like, oh, gut punch, right?
Yeah.
And it's not really meant to be that. It's a matter of seeing things clearly. And sometimes we need to have those moments. And sometimes you think about, okay, I'm going to have the hard conversation. And if you avoid it because you are afraid of what might happen versus avoiding it because you're okay if nothing happens. And if that's where you are, then own that, right? Don't just avoid the conversation because you're scared of it. If you don't need to have the conversation because emotionally you wanted something to change, but when you settled down and you thought clearly, you thought, okay, you know what? I overthought that. Mm-hmm. That's totally okay.
Yeah.
We're not saying be confrontational about every single thing. Like everybody needs to kind of work through some things.
But that requires that conversation with yourself,
Correct.
To figure out if it is a problem that you should approach someone else with her.
Right. Yeah. And so through some of my training with the Brain-Based Coaching and Neuro Leadership Institute out of New York, so I've been a people leader for 20 plus years now. And so I really needed to get great to effectively lead all the time, not just during the good times. Mm-hmm. I needed to get great at having, some people call them crucial conversations. If you're in leadership at all, you'll hear crucial conversations all the time. It just adds more weight to the conversation, which doesn't really help anybody. But what this is about giving feedback when you need behavior change, thought to change, something to change. This is really for anybody, but I apply it to the work setting. So there's kind of a step-by-step process of this. So the way this works is addressing the detail, problem, and the drama behind the problem. But that's where most people stop. When they have an issue with somebody, they say, like you've already alluded to, you did this. This is the stress it's causing me, and you just keep focusing on the problem itself. Mm-hmm. So for some structure for people, so this detail, problem, drama, but what the secret really is the vision and the plan. You don't have to have the plan, but you have to leave the conversation with one. If you both need to work on something, if you say, here's what I need, whether it's career or personal life, here's how I need you to show up for me. What can we work on together? Nobody wants to be changed. People respond much better when they're part of a change. Mm-hmm. And so if you let them be a part of the solution, I'm not saying don't come like you did, come with a solution, which is totally fine. Mm-hmm. But it's just a matter of like setting the expectation clearly of here's what I need. How do you think you can do that? Or how can I help you accomplish this vision or plan. So, and it could be as simple as something as like somebody showing up late for work. I know that sounds like a simple thing, but a lot of times people say, if you show up late again, you're going to get fired. Okay. Like I get that. But as the leader, what if you ask the question of what's going on there? If it's new behavior, if it's not new behavior, if it's happening all the time, what's going on there? Ask the question, but then also have like the vision and the plan. Like the vision is you're here every day on time. But working with them to say, what's your plan? If they're like, I just can't, in the mornings, my life is this, that, maybe you work with them and coach them on a morning plan, but not just saying, okay, well, you can show up later than everybody else and that's totally fine.
Right.
That's not a plan, right? That's enabling. So there's a lot of factors when it comes to this, but just always thinking about detailed problem, drama, vision, and plan is really healthy in the sense of like, as somebody who's about to have a hard conversation, the reason why your heart starts racing and your palms get sweaty and you're just frantically thinking is you're making it about you. You are part of the conversation, but you're not the only one in the conversation. So once you start to think about why am I having the conversation? What kind of impact do I want to have on this other person? What is the solution? You start to then feel like it's actually you and the other person. And so so typically when people have tough conversations, they started off, Shari Harley talks about this, but she talks about kind of a cookie crunch conversation where you're getting ready to have a really hard conversation, again, professionally or personally. Maybe you're really upset with the person you're in a relationship with and you're like, hey, how was your day? I'm like, oh, it was good. How about you? Like, oh, mine was good. We need to talk.
Yeah.
But like that initial thing is to make you feel better as opposed to, hey, can we talk? Like having a plan to not try to soften the mood and then throw the curveball.
Right.
But just say, something in the sense of we need to talk. I've been thinking about something. We need to have a conversation. Something's been heavy on my mind, whatever it is. Because if you start throwing curveballs at people, they're like, wait, are they serious? Or are they not? Are we joking? Are we not?
Right.
Are we in the car? Are we in two different rooms? If in a personal relationship and then, it's just kind of one of those things that we try to do. So manage yourself in hard conversations, like thinking about what are you thinking about right before you go into it and make it less about only you, right? Like you have to be prepared mentally, but also knowing that like your heartbeat isn't your inability. It's not nerves. It's just you care about how the conversation goes. And there are times where you're going to have a tough conversation and a person's not going to receive it well. But being compassionate enough to know like that's part of it. Like sometimes in a professional setting, your job is sometimes to have a hard conversation to change behavior and sometimes say like, maybe this isn't the opportunity for you. But it's never easy. I never want those conversations when we're going to say hard versus easy. I never want them to be easy. I want them to be hard because I care about the people. Just like you and all of your clients. You authentically care about all of us. But if we start doing things that aren't in alignment with our agreed upon standards,
right,
I expect you to. Now, the other thing is if I start having the same things with you, we have to create something between us to where I can say, hey, Bryon, like this isn't us. Now, there has to be trust and all these different things that go into building relationships. Not that the conversations aren't hard, but they're a little bit more predictable. And just like you told me from the very beginning, like, so you're a guy shooting podcasts, let's make them better. Sometimes that's a hard conversation with people, but how do I tell them? But that wasn't hard for us, right? So it's a matter of, if it's hard, thinking about why. Is it hard because you haven't developed the relationship with the person? Is it hard because of the news? And like I said, that's really up to each person to have this conversation of how do I make it more of a meaningful conversation and less thinking about hard? And how do I be more ready to listen to the other person as opposed to play the whole scenario out in your brain and then just plug somebody in and be like, well, you didn't say what I thought you were going to say. Because I've had these conversations before too with people when I say, how can I show up for you? And they say, I don't know. I don't know what that means. I'm like, oh, well, I thought you were going to say that like you were going to have a tough day and you needed me to help you with things.
Right.
But you don't know. Which makes me now want to have a totally different conversation. So it's really just like there's a prep piece, but there's also like an open-mindedness to why are you having the conversation so that you can be flexible in how that person responds.
Well, if you think about it in terms of like if you're going to have a conversation with another person and you're coming in prepared, some sort of preparation, you know the conversation is going to happen. The other person doesn't, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's where people can be felt like they're taken off guard. You know, if I was to just walk in here and be like, TJ, you didn't pay me, you'd probably be like, I thought we were going to sit down and record this podcast, you know, like whatever, you know. TJ always pays, by the way. Just that, this is just an example.
But he would call me out if I didn't.
I would. But we have that relationship, you know. I could be like, hey, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
But that's one of those things where, so for instance, that situation that I said, there's a lot of evidence, and I've watched other podcasts about people talking about this. Like humans are very resilient, mentally and physically, way more than you think. As you know, you can be like, oh, you know, I can trip and then feel like I need to cry about it or something, you know. But in reality, your body is way more resilient. Your mind is way more resilient. And doing the hard things, like the last podcast we talked about, doing the hard things on purpose, that makes you way better at doing these hard things, you know, having hard conversations. Not that you need to go around telling everyone your problems with them and have hard conversations on purpose, you know, but it does come with practice, you know. And if you're the person who is open to having hard conversations, like I said, I've always been the person since I was young to people way older than me would come to me with problems. And I could help them rationalize and think rationally, even from a young age. And so some people, I think, have a knack for it a little bit more, but this is something that anybody can work on. If you're going to approach a hard conversation and you know that you're going to have the conversation with someone else and the other person doesn't know it's coming, it's way better to let them prepare themselves. Some sort of something. Let them brace themselves. Think this is a random example, but I always watch UFC fighting, you know? So like if I was to just walk in and punch you in the stomach, you'd probably fall over, you know? If I was to be like, hey, brace yourself, I'm going to punch you in the stomach, you're going to just take it probably, you know? That is an extreme example. Don't go around punching people either. But like, that's an example of like, if you have time, even if it's just, hey, I need to talk to you about something real quick, rather than what you just said, you know, like, hey, how are you? We need to talk. That is the opposite of what you should do. If you're going to have a hard conversation, for example, the example I used earlier, I sent him a text message and I said, hey, this isn't a text conversation. Like, you don't have hard conversations in text unless it's absolutely necessary. Yeah. Things can get taken sideways in text. There is no voice. There's no human connection. Yeah. And so that's another thing I would say. Don't have super hard conversations through text message. It's not good for anybody. If it's an actual hard conversation and if there's an ability to have it in person or somewhere where you can see each other face to face. Yeah. Whether that's a Zoom call or something like that if you're remote. But giving the other person an opportunity to brace themselves and know that a hard conversation could be coming, you know? And so I sent him a text message and I said, hey, it's not like he didn't know that this situation was going on. It was one of those where I know he's fully aware also. And so I say, hey, here's the situation. Next time you're around, we need to figure out a solution. And I got some ideas, and preface with that, like, I got some ideas for you. We just need to get to a solution. And then he just responded with, sounds good. You know, so then he knows the next time he's around, the next time we're available to sit down and chat, we're going to sit down and have a potentially hard conversation. Yeah. So he has all the time in the world to prepare. Or if you, it's like your instance, if you're the boss of a company or something and you need to have that conversation, I should say leader, not boss. And, you know, having them come to your office. If you call someone to your office as the head of a company, that's already nerve-wracking. Whether you're going to praise someone or fire them, all of it goes through their head, you know? And so you could preface it with, hey, I need to talk to you about this situation. Can you come in later? Or whatever the situation is. And then that way they know, like, hey, this is what this is about. I can prepare myself. If I was wrong in this scenario, then, you know, I can brace myself for it. Yeah. And so you just give them an ability to not feel like you're walking up and punching them without telling them, you know.
Yeah. And there's so much to consideration to this in the sense that if we pause for a minute, like maybe all the prep we need to do is consider the other person in this. So even if, like with Mary, for you, if you just send her a message, say, we need to talk. You guys have a lot of trust. You have a lot of things, but that is a trigger for pretty much everybody.
That's a stereotype for a reason. That we need to talk thing.
Yeah. Right. Or so it's really kind of thinking about, again, whether it's in your personal or professional life, but how is the other person going to, because the first thing that everybody thinks when somebody says we need to talk or can you come to my office is what's wrong?
And they jump to the worst possible outcome as well.
Or what is this about? Or, their first question or their first thought isn't gratitude. Their first thought is fear. Mm-hmm. So if you say like, hey, we're good. There's just been something on my mind. I really want to talk to you about it. And again, you and Mary have your own thing, but it's just a matter of like understanding how the other person then may say yes, or they may say, what's it about or whatever. Right. And you can do whatever you want to do there. But like with employees, it's a matter of, I always want to create this idea of psychological safety. In my personal relationships, people always know where I stand. Not in a where I stand kind of energy, but more of a certainty. Mm-hmm. They know that if I ever have anything that I want to talk to them about, I'm just going to talk to them. They know the other way as well. If I said or did something that offended them or upset them or didn't sit right, I'm asking in the very beginning, just come talk to me about it.
Yeah.
But how you respond when somebody actually does try to come have that hard conversation determines whether or not they're ever going to do it again.
Yep.
If somebody, if Mary comes to you and says, the way that, you recording podcasts with TJ on the weekends is really bothering, our family life, how you respond to her in that moment instead of like, well, when else do you want me to do it? Mm-hmm. If you respond with, okay, I'll talk to TJ and we'll find some better times. She'll then feel more comfortable to come to you with more things that are affecting your guys' life, right? Mm-hmm. So there's also like this ownership of there may be somebody out there who wants to have a hard conversation with us, but they're not sure how. So really kind of reflect on your own of like, how do I respond when people come to me with things that I need to work on or that they have feedback about? And there's a lot of times when it comes to work environments, I tell people, I want to give you some feedback on an interaction I saw today. Like, come on by whenever you have a minute. They don't panic coming over there, but in the beginning, some people don't really know what to think of it, and even performance evaluations. And I have an amazing team that they know about feedback. I talk to them every day, but there's still like this human thing of uncertainty in anybody, no matter how much you trust somebody. So if you can think of like, okay, well, my person that I love and the people I work with every day, they know me. I'm sure it'll be fine. If that's your first thought, go back. Mm-hmm. Think, okay, they may not be as certain as I am about them, as they may not be that certain about me. So just be vulnerable enough to think, I need to consider them a little bit, and not just say, can you come to my office, or we need to talk. Because again, like I've said, which is interestingly enough, like we did a podcast a while ago, and this one quote, this one thought, like blew up all over social media, and like I don't know that it went viral. I don't even know what viral means.
Relative to everything else.
Relative to everything else. But whenever I said that consideration is the deepest form of love, and considering other people's trauma, their past, their worries, their anxieties. So what I'm asking and what I'm really saying in this moment of having a hard conversation, whether it's a friend or the person you get to spend the rest of your life with or whoever, show up in gratitude and in consideration for them, because you being somebody that's easy to talk to is because of how you treat them all the time. Mm-hmm. And Bryon and I kind of before we do every episode, we kind of jam for a little bit. And that was the one thing that I really feel like is important because who you are all the time is going to give them confidence in who you're going to show up that time and how you're going to have the conversation that time. And so being the person that people come to, because people come to me a lot with emotions, and people say, I bet you feel like a therapist, or you make I can talk to you about anything. It's easy to talk to you, those kind of things. And people say it's safe. I think that's only from a place of, I also need the same. And so being willing to just listen to people and not judge people is super important, because most of the time people are judging themselves. And so when you're having that tough conversation with your client, he probably didn't feel great about it,
right,
but he probably didn't know what to do about it until you kind of came with a plan and with grace and with, empathy and whatever else needs to happen. I know there was a time that I think there was a week that I didn't pay you a week. I normally pay you within the first 4 days of the month, and I hadn't, and you just sent me a message and said, didn't see your payment. I didn't get offended by it, but we've already established this thing, but I already knew, and you know that I care about paying you, and those kind of things.
I knew it was always the beginning of the month, because your payment would come through, and I was like, I was questioning what day it was, because I didn't, so I knew it was like TJ must have forgot, because he always does this. Yeah. And so I felt safe sending that text and being like, I think you forgot. Yeah. Not like, hey, I need your money right now. Pay me.
Yeah. Yeah, didn't send me a bunch of cash bag emojis or anything, right? Right. And that's just, again, thinking about consideration of other people. And, whenever we first started talking about this theme of the episode, I first reflected on some of the hard conversations I need to have with myself. And there's, again, another thought. I don't even know what quotes are anymore these days, because it's really more thoughts than anything else. But it's like this. I have two of them that are bouncing around in my brain a lot. But the magic you're looking for is in the work you're avoiding, which is a self-conversation. And then you don't need a new strategy. You just need to become the person who executes the strategy you already have.